Themes are important to any story, but how can we use them in writing our fiction? The answer has many parts, and some of them might surprise you. This video is very long, and it will be broken down into 3 main sections. First, we're going to cover what are themes. Second, we'll go over how to find themes or how to choose themes. And then lastly, we'll look at how you can use themes. But before we jump into it, I just want to preface this video by saying I'm not a published author. I shouldn't be giving anyone writing advice. That's why I relied on knowledgeable sources for researching this video, like real professional writers that are referenced throughout. If you'd like to look at any sources before we jump into it, you can check those out in the description below. With that out of the way, let's talk about themes. Starting things off, let's establish what a theme is, and more specifically, what it means in the context of writing fiction. Dictionary is typically a good place to look for these kinds of things, so let's see what old Merriam has to say. It says here that theme can be a subject or topic of discourse or of artistic representation, and it also says it can be a specific and distinctive quality, characteristic, or concern. I guess we should just call it there, right? Got our definition. Oh, if only writing were that easy. Yes, this definition works on a rudimentary level, but I don't think any of our sources are going to agree that this definition encapsulates what a theme is for writers and for fiction. Let's take J.D. Edwin's piece on writing theme. She says that a theme is an idea that recurs throughout our story. And she even gets more specific, saying that a theme is a message that you keep reminding your reader over and over again because it's what your story is really about. All right, now we're getting somewhere, right? Theme has to have a through line. It has to be continuous and consistent. So I can just pick whatever I want to be a theme. Any single worded concept can just smack it right on a story and that'll be our theme, right? Well, no. But single worded concepts are important and we're going to be coming back to those, so make sure you hang on to them. Actually, according to Amy Lawrence's book, How to Theme, she says that single words like power and love and freedom, those single worded concepts shouldn't be used as themes at all. So single words, those are too vague. But how many words does it take to write a theme? Well, the answer is as many words as it takes to convey the message of your story, because that's what a theme is. When you go and see a cool movie at the movie theaters, do you come back and tell a friend, oh, this movie was great, you should go see it, it was about love? No. Because 1, it doesn't tell you anything about the movie, and 2, it doesn't resonate with people. It's the same exact thing with theme. It has to be specific and focused. Why though? Why can't my story be just about love? So what if it doesn't resonate with people? What is it, an instrument? It needs to have resonance? Well, actually, a great reason why an unfocused theme falls flat is given to us by Henry on his YouTube channel, A Closer Look. In his video, You're Writing Themes Wrong, he explains that he sent in a novel and publishers were unimpressed by its scattered concepts and lack of cohesion with exploring specific themes. In other words, his novel's themes were too general, and that made him boring. Alright, let's think about this in a different way. What movie would you rather see? That super lame movie you talked about earlier and described as, it's about love? Or would you rather go see a film that explores if it's better to perpetuate hatred and stay alive, or be in love, but die tragically from a simple misunderstanding? You'd pick Romeo and Juliet every time, and let's not debate over whether that was the theme or not. I spoke to old Willie myself, and he confirmed it. But back to the task at hand, there's a reason that Romeo and Juliet sounds so much more gosh darn cool. And it's because you're human. When themes dive into specific and relatable ideas, we can't help but eat it up. They can either reinforce our values and beliefs or open us up to new perspectives entirely. It's in that sense that they're relatable to the human condition. I mean, I for one, and I'm sure all of you have been there too, have found myself in the position where the sight of a dead lover just made me want to chug poison. And that's the beauty of themes and Leonardo DiCaprio. But jokes aside, in the off chance that you're an academic with no sense of humor and I'm really just not getting through to you, maybe this quote from Amy Lawrence's book will clear it up. Theme is to fiction as thesis is to nonfiction. It makes sense though, right? It's essentially the argument you're making or the opinion you're taking on a certain concept. It can't just be adventuring. It has to be something like, adventuring is fun, but it also reminds us how unique our own home is. Man, I have no idea why I'm not a professional writer with this kind of material. But you see what Amy Lawrence means. A theme has to take a stand and has to reinforce to the reader why it's on that side. Before we dive into how writers can choose and develop their themes, let's touch a little more on why they're so important. Aside from what we just mentioned briefly about them connecting to everyone's humanity, there are many other reasons. In fact, Amy Lawrence's entire second section of her book covers a plethora of reasons why themes are so important. Maybe most fascinating to me is how they help us remember things. That is, they act as memory aids. In the 9th chapter of the book, Amy references the Australian indigenous concept of songlines, which are stories that are tied to specific geographical locations. They not only have a ton of cultural significance, but they also relate to younger generations' indispensable features for survival. Personally, this reminds me of a book I read way back in 7th grade by Gary Paulson called Hatchet. Even though I read this way back many years ago, I still remember important parts of the book that helped the boy survive in the woods, and what almost killed him, like the moose. They're not cuddly forest friends, they're murderers. The fact that I remember these details from so long ago just tells me that stories and themes have played an integral role in our development as a species and our survival. Another interesting part of this book is chapter 11, which makes the case for themes and stories being protectors and drivers of social power structures. Speaking again from my personal experience, it seems very true. Depending on where you live, you might have seen films about evil tyrants and protecting democracy. Or maybe you've been inundated your whole life with stories that have religious themes. These themes impact us and our worldviews. Don't believe me? Consider all the times that societies have banned books or burned them even. That wouldn't be the case if ideas and stories didn't have a lot of power. Alright, let's do a quick recap. So we've learned that fairy tales are the only reason that you remember anything, and that themes and stories have indoctrinated you into this modern, exploitative society. Perfect. Well, it's time we plunged into how to choose or find themes. And this section's big, so listen up. Or, if you already have a theme in mind, just skip to the next section. It's not a big deal. For this section, let's first look at how a writer might find a theme in their story. Amy Lawrence's 7th chapter of her book goes over this scenario quite succinctly and in way more depth. For those of you interested, I highly recommend that you read it. The situation, though, is when a writer has an idea for a story, they maybe even started writing, but they don't necessarily have a theme in mind. If this is you, then discovering your theme sort of depends on the writing style that you're using. For example, if you're a pantser, then your theme process is going to be a lot different than a plotter. I guess I should probably clarify those terms, huh? Pantsers got their name because they write by the seat of their pants. That is, they start writing and they just let the story take them where they want. Plotters, on the other hand, they like to have more structure to their writing. They like to have a roadmap. This is where we're going to use those single-worded concepts that I mentioned earlier. For pantsers, after writing for a while and getting your characters established, hammering out some of the details with your plot, you'll start to see some of those concepts emerge. Maybe your story's a heist story. Maybe it's a horror story or a love story. Maybe it's about revenge and power and courage. Or maybe it's about intergenerational familial dynamics from the interwar to the post-war period. Like general stuff. Well, as you continue to write and you start deciding on the character arcs and the conflict and the plot and how all of those start to interact with one another, you'll start making decisions about how your characters navigate those scenes, how they deal with those concepts. Once you've landed on how you want those to shape up, then your theme will be apparent. And then it's just a matter of going back and editing around the theme. On the flip side, and flip side I mean plotters, of course, you might even have a whole outline prepared, in which case you can ask those same exact questions. The nice thing here is that you can analyze the outline and the ending, take your character's main positions on those concepts, and then, using that theme, you can go back and make edits to your plot and characters so that they better fit the theme. If you're still unsure about what your theme is when looking at your outline, Abi Wurdeman has a list of questions that might help you in her article, seriously, how do you write a theme for a novel? The questions are, what is the protagonist's internal conflict? What lesson are they supposed to learn? Is there a message at the heart of the external conflict? Hint, look at the difficult choices your protagonist has to make, ways in which they are the same as, or the opposite of, the antagonist, and how the conflict is resolved. What character archetypes take center stage in this story? What themes emerge naturally from those archetypes? And lastly, do you see any of yourself or your own life in this story? Why do you think those autobiographical details found their way into your novel? Moving on though, if you don't have a theme in mind and you'd rather build your story completely around a theme, that is a totally valid technique for creating a story. Abbie Emmons has a good YouTube video explaining this called How to Write Theme into Your Story. She says that writers can pick a personal truth they want to share, something extremely important to them, then make their character believe the opposite or a misbelief about the truth. After that, the writer should have their character reinforce that misbelief, making it part of their normal behavior to cement the misbelief as an essential character trait. In the end, something will happen, something drastic, that will make the character shed their misbelief and have their aha moment coming to the ultimate truth. Ah, sweet catharsis. There's a reason that so many stories are structured like that, and it's because it slaps. Obviously, that's just a very short breakdown of her video, and you should go and watch it for yourself. Okay, sweet, that's some good advice, but what if you're still having trouble coming up with a theme? It's not like everyone just has personal truths laying around. Or maybe they do, and they just don't know it. Wait, that's a theme.
Write that down.
The point I'm trying to get to is that sometimes just changing the form of a theme, or how we perceive it, can get those metaphorical juices really flowing. Going back to Henry's YouTube video, he argues that we can instead change our theme into a question. This helps us zero in on the specificity of the theme, instead of sliding backwards into those wishy-washy, single-worded concepts. I personally have really liked this idea, and I've started incorporating it into my own writing and my own stories. Oh geez, this is like one of those good times for an example. Okay, pressure's on. Let's say that you are really into like political science and sociology or something, and you think, maybe popular traditions and cultural norms can be detrimental to the welfare of a society. Well, voila, that's a thematic question. That's something that we can base a story around. That's a theme. An apt story for something like this might be, there's like a princess and she has to compete in this popular triathlon, and whoever wins, they get to rule the empire. I know. I have a gift. But you can see how by just reorienting the perception of the theme, we narrowed the focus down from those wishy-washy concepts like power and governance and society, and now our characters, they have to take a stance on it. They have to take a position on that question. They have to answer it somehow. Alright, now I kind of have to do something where I put a wrench in everything we just talked about, because all the sources agree that no matter how much you fret over the theme, no matter how much you think about it and try and shape it, anything you write, it's going to have a theme anyway. So the most important thing you can do is to just not let the theme get in the way of you actually writing. If you're struggling to find a theme, or you're just not sure what your story's theme is, just get through the first draft. By the end, you'll know what the meaning of your story really is. Phew! Who knew there was so much about themes, am I right? Now we need to talk about how to actually use themes in your writing. After you've figured out your theme, whether that came sooner or later, you're going to have to figure out how to incorporate that into your story. We sort of touched on this with Abbie Emmons' video. I mean, she gave like a really good example, but let's dig a little deeper. The number one cardinal rule is that you can't come out and tell your audience exactly what your theme is. If you do this, then your message is going to come off too preachy or maybe too on the nose, and this should be avoided at all costs. Most readers are likely just going to do this automatically because they're going to follow that old practice of showing and not telling, but it's still important to reiterate. But how can we avoid the message when that's what our theme's all about? Well, Amy Lawrence gives us a good tip, and it's paradoxically to use those single-worded concepts from before. That's right. Those things we said shouldn't be used as themes are still very practical tools. Amy Lawrence says, concepts. Stick to the concepts. And that's because these can ironically hint at your theme while still allowing your character arc space to manifest the true meaning. Another one of our sources, J.D. Edwin, actually echoes this advice. She says in her article that writers can list out 10 words associated with a concept and then use those in their writing. This strategy of using those general ideas and concepts to stay on message actually has another practical application, which is to help you discern what's actually worth keeping in your story. I mean, let's face it, it's really easy to get carried away, especially on your first draft, and just start writing all sorts of stuff. But if those things aren't there to help illustrate those one-worded ideas, then they can likely be cut out. Again, Amy Lawrence shares her wisdom with us in this quote. If a scene fits with your core concepts in some substantial way, you're probably good to keep it. If it doesn't touch on any of them, the scene is likely to feel disconnected and/or irrelevant to the main story. So, pushing aside using those general concepts, how can you, the writer, actually write your theme into your story? For this, Abi Wurdeman's article gives us a concise guide. She says that we need to integrate our theme into our character arcs, our symbols, and our dialogue. Again, we touched on character arcs when we summarized Abbie Emmons' video, but there's always more to say. This is probably a good time to blow your mind. The thing is, stories can have a lot of themes. Like, your story probably has themes coming out of its ears. Your main themes, those are likely to revolve around your main character. But don't forget about those minor characters. They, along with the plot, those are going to supply your story with all their sub-themes. Amy Lawrence tells us that there's 2 things we can do about sub-themes. One is to just straight up ignore them. Let's just let the chips fall where they may. Chances are at least some of your sub-themes will reinforce your main theme. And if they don't, it's no big deal. Your story's going to survive. The second course of option that she tells us is to try and incorporate those sub-themes and minor characters into the main theme. This apparently scratches some kind of subconscious itch that humans frickin' love. Another way of thinking about this is to jump back to Henry's YouTube video where he tells us we can think about theme as a question. So if your protagonist has a specific answer to this question, then we can have all of our minor characters have different answers for that same question. Let's return to my legendary example of a thematic question. If the princess, the one who's competing in the triathlon to rule the empire, decides, yeah, there's dumb traditions. This triathlon's a dumb tradition where all we do is get bad rulers because of this triathlon. Well, then we can also have side characters that give a different perspective or answer to this question. Let's say that there's a prince who's also competing in the triathlon. Well, this prince is very charming and the people love him and he has the best governing ability, but tragically he drowns while swimming in the triathlon. Well, just that act of him dying, that can relate that there's another answer to the theme, that not only can it be a detriment to the public, but it can also hurt the ruling class. Then, if we just wanted to throw a villain in there really quick, it would be super easy. They could have the opinion that, of course, these traditions serve a purpose. They weed out those who aren't fit to rule. If you're really jealous right now of my medieval triathlon story, I'm sorry. What you need to take away from this is that your story can have multiple messages surrounding one theme just through different character arcs. If you're paying attention, the next on our list is how to incorporate theme into your story using symbols. I guess I'll continue with the triathlon if, twist my arm, but I mean, we just kind of came up with this at the start and now it's becoming the greatest story ever told, so let's just roll with it. Let's do it. So for a symbol of a cultural tradition that could be impractical and a liability, we could use the crown. Like, let's say that while the triathlon's happening, the current emperor has to come down to officiate, and he's wearing the crown. Well, the first day it's raining, and he just gets sopping wet because it doesn't keep his head dry. Then the next day, he comes out and the clouds part, and the sun is beaming down on his bald head. and he gets a horrible sunburn, so it actually hurts him because he has to wear this crown. Symbols like these, they reinforce the theme without telling your audience exactly what the message is. Then lastly, we have dialogue, and dialogue is really where writers, they want to take caution, because this is a very easy part of your novel where you can overdo your theme. Don't worry, I'm done with the triathlon examples, I promise. Instead, we're going to turn to Abi Wurdeman's article, which says, when you start looking for statements of theme in the books and movies you consume, you'll start seeing them constantly. The best friend in the romance says, you wouldn't have to change yourself for him if he really loved you. The detective's British granny says, you mustn't assume people are what they seem. It's rarely the protagonist who states the theme. So, subtle dialogue is probably the most obvious way for you to incorporate theme into your story, but it's also the trickiest. At least it is for me. And now you know about how to use theme in your writing. I hope that I was able to synthesize all this information coherently and provide to you the same valuable knowledge that all these enlightening authors gave me. Speaking of which, you should really watch or read all the material these authors have on theme. Even though this is a long video, I wasn't able to touch on everything they said, and they said a lot of really revelatory things. Since we're at the end, I wonder if you're the same as me and you are having a minor panic attack because now you're going back and thinking about your characters and your plot and the themes. Writing is daunting. Just remember that themes will naturally develop as you write. All this mumbo jumbo that we talked about, it's just to help you keep themes present in your mind and to help you be better equipped to use them in your writing. But no matter what you write, it will have a theme. They'll always be there in your writing. Thank you so much for watching. Till the next video. Bye.